Welcome back, everybody, and today we're going to continue on by looking at power, but today we're going to talk about using power, how we accumulate it, and how it's abused oftentimes. So let's go ahead today and get started in another aspect of power as we take a look at using power. Okay, let's continue on today with Chapter 13 as we take a look at positional and personal power. Now, when it comes to these two, position power resides, as you see here, in the person, regardless of who is filling that position. Personal power resides in the person, regardless of the position being filled. Now, you can exert power either way. Positional power means that I have the authority, I have the legitimate power over a person to be able to tell them to do what I want them to do. But that doesn't mean they're going to respect you. It doesn't mean that they're going to endear themselves to you. Personal power is the person, their ability to endear others to them, to gain their trust, to motivate them just because of who they are and so forth. For instance, there were people in history who inspired individuals just because of their personal charisma. John F. Kennedy, in some of his speeches, Abraham Lincoln, he led a nation into war, civil war, and people devoted themselves to him. Again, Billy Graham, Martin Luther King Jr., I guess, would be another example where people had power just because of who they were. And to be honest with you, that's the best kind of power. Yeah, positional power will give you the ability to get things done, but personal power will have a person follow you wherever. There's a saying, actually two sayings that we used to have in the military. There are people who I would follow into fire, and there are people who I would push into the middle of it. And then also, too, they will respect your position because they have to, but they won't necessarily respect you unless you earn it. And those are two sayings that I've always had in the back of my mind wherever I've gone all these years. But positional power and personal power are both ways in which people can exert their authority over others and be able to do it from two different perspectives. Now, acquiring power. There's several ways where power can become easier for you to obtain. Your power is greater if things you control are important. If there's not a lot of importance with the aspects of whatever it is you have control over, then you're not going to have much power, or your power is not going to mean much. Rare is who you are or what you're doing. Is that something that's common, or is it unique? And again, when you go back to expert power and these things, if what you are acquiring, if the things over you are not commonplace, if it's a special ability, then you have power over other people. And now there are some people who I have known who have worked for the government, and they have been able really to just dictate to the government what they're going to do. For instance, I knew a man who, still know him, who was an expert in cybersecurity. Now, that's an important job today with all the hacking and stuff going on with people's computers. But his level of ability was rare. Not too many people had that ability. And he was without substitute. If they lost him, they wouldn't be able to replace him, at least not easily. So he worked for the IRS, and he was able to command pretty much his own price. He was making very high a six-figure income, and he got to dictate really what he was going to do and what he wasn't going to do. They couldn't tell him no because he had that important, rare, and without substitute ability. Now, abuse of power is the use of power to demean, exploit, or take advantage of someone. When you see people manipulating others for their own gain to the detriment of others, then that's an abuse of power. And we've seen in politicians accusations of abuse of power going back and forth through just about every administration. But when you do it to demean or hurt others, you're really a bully. And that's really not, it's not a ethical ability, it's not an ethical value in the pagan world, and it's not a Christian value in the world of Christianity either. So it's looked down upon in both worlds. And it's influencing someone to do something they later regret. And this is where I guess I had a conflict at times, because I was sending people into the military. Now, I never lied to them, and I didn't coerce them. But what I did was use their emotions and show them how their emotional need could be met by the military. I haven't had one person to ever say they regretted going in. Now, my recruiter, when I first went in, just plain old lied. I looked up to him. He had positional power. He had legitimate power. He had persuasive power. He had information power. I mean, he knew exactly what to say and what information to give and what information I needed. So he had a lot of things going for him. But there were some outright lies that he told me, and I regretted not going into the military, but taking the job that he had recommended that I take, at least when I first went in. But doing something that people will regret, or knowing that you will hurt them. Now, I did have an issue when I was younger. I was a door-to-door salesman, really, selling vacuum cleaners. And these vacuum cleaners were expensive. But I would sell them. I was able to get in there and persuade, and people who I knew couldn't afford these things were buying them. And I finally got out of it because it was too much. And that's when I really had a conflict of conscience. And I believe it was the Holy Spirit convicting me too. But you see that all the time. Used car salesmen, or even a new car salesman, can get in there. A good salesman will have you buying a vehicle that is way beyond what you can afford, and you'll later regret it. Now, is that an abuse of power, or just being a good salesman? You tell me. But normally, in business, when you are in a position of authority, when you use your power to hurt others, or to demean others, or to elevate yourself to the detriment of others, that's when it becomes a problem. In fact, that's when it becomes an abuse of power. Now, empowerment. Empowerment is sharing power with employees and giving them the authority to make some decisions. It can improve quality, cut cost, and boost efficiency and flexibility. But just giving employees power is not enough. They have to be skilled and trained and motivated for it. Now, empowerment came around with a guy named Edward Deming right after World War II. He introduced this idea of total quality management. And what he had formulated in his mind, his model was to give power to the employee, to let them be some of the decision makers in the organization, to develop them, and once they're developed, trained, motivated, then let them make decisions. And we laughed him out of the country. We weren't ready for that yet. We still went under the old autocratic, do as I say because I'm the boss type of model. Now, he went to Japan, and Japan embraced him. And from the 40s up until current times, TQM has been their model of success. And they embraced it so much that they have become the standard in many technology and manufacturing industries. For instance, Toyota. Toyota has been able to outperform all of the American competitors. In fact, when Toyota won the Malcolm Baldrige Award, which is a reward for management excellence, other companies such as GM and Ford, Chrysler, were able to go in and see how Toyota had gotten to be so far advanced in their manufacturing of Toyota automobiles. Now, there wasn't anything different in the equipment. The people had the same qualifications, but it's the way that they empowered the Japanese to be able to make decisions and create quality circles of improvement that really made the difference between them and American-made industries or companies, automobile companies. So letting the people, once they are qualified, start sharing in the responsibility and decision making has gleaned all types of rewards for those that incorporate that. And it is really a requirement now for what we call the learning organization. The learning organization is the organization of today that grows. It's organic. It's not seen as a structure with individual components. Today, learning organizations see themselves as an organism, a growing, functional, interactive entity that is continually evolving and developing, not only from the outside, but also from the inside. So empowerment is one of those key features. Now, how subunits gain power. First of all, there are scarce resources. That magnifies the power differences across subunits. The scarcer the resource, the more power you have when you have that resource. And people are always vying for resources. In fact, when you take a look at budgeting each year for a company, the lion's share of the money goes to the most essential functions in that organization. Everybody else has to scrape and fight for their allotment of money, and they have to outperform others to be able to get a good portion of the money. So scarce resources, centrality, and that's the extent to which a subunit's activities influence the work of many other subunits. So if you take a look at how important and how influential one unit is in relation to the units that it can affect, that's when you're looking at centrality. Substitutionability, and that's the extent to which a subunit's activities can be performed by others. If we can substitute you for something else, then you don't have a lot of power. That's why you have to maintain those unique characteristics and abilities that no one else can replace. In business and strategic management, we call that a competitive advantage. Now, you gain a competitive advantage by developing what we call core competencies. A core competency is something that you do well, and you do it consistently. And once you do it well and consistently, at least better than your rivals, then you have a competitive advantage over those rivals. And this is how you stay alive in business, within an industry, and also as a leader in a subunit and so forth. And then subunits most capable of dealing with uncertainty tend to have greater power. And today, as we are constantly changing and evolving, uncertainty is the ability to deal with uncertainty is a major plus for any individual and any subunit, because things are changing dynamically, and the status quo is no longer the status quo anymore. Now, influence tactics, you have coalition tactics, engaging help of others to persuade someone. I don't know if you watch the show, my wife and daughters love it, but it's called Survivor. It's that reality show where people are on this desert island and they have to survive, and the last one, I guess, standing wins $1 million. Here, I've seen a few of their episodes, not a big fan. But one thing that I noticed that they try to do once they are, I guess, well into the game is to develop coalitions, trying to gain allies, and as they eradicate people not in the in-group, only then do they start looking at each other. So coalitions, your ability to develop coalitions is important. Consultation, and that's requesting someone's advice to solve a problem. You can be a very influential individual just by going to others and reaching out to them. And this is a way of developing a coalition or an alliance. But consultation is the act of asking for advice. Exchange, looking for cooperation by offering something of value to an individual for their cooperation. Ingratiation, and that's flattering someone to put them in a good mood. And there are plenty of people out there who do that. Inspirational appeals. This is appealing to the values and the ideas to gain a commitment from people. Legitimating tactics, enhancing one's formal authority. If you don't listen to me, then you've got to listen to the rules. And they lead by the rule book. I know I was just made pastor at the church where I'm serving now, and we had one deacon who walked around with the bylaws in his back pocket. And he actually thought he was the CEO of the whole church. Now, no one really respected him. No one listened to him. In fact, after I had become pastor, when we started to look at the qualifications for deacon, we saw that he really didn't meet the qualifications on several dimensions, or on several different points. But he would walk around and he would tell people, you need to do this, this is in our bylaws, and this, that, and the other. No one would listen to him as a person, but he would try to lean on bylaws and rules to get people to listen to him. They still didn't listen to him, but at least he tried that. And there are people in business today that will just look at the rule book and they rule by the rule book. Personal appeals, asking for favors because we're friends, calling in the friendship chip and all of that. Pressure, that's coercion or persisting. You know, you can wear a person down. Some people have that down to an art form. They'll just wear you down until you give in. Or they have other ways of coercing. Rational persuasion, and that's using logic and facts to persuade someone. Then you have responses to influence attempts. Commitment, which means you're bought into it. You're committed to whatever the endeavor may be, and you see it through to the end. There's compliance. You go along with it, but you're not really personally committed to it. You're just going to go because it's the thing to do. Passive resistance, you know, you reject the influence attempt, but not get in the way of what the influencer is trying to do. And there's been times when I've seen different churches in our association do things that I'm not very happy with, that I'm concerned about. But, you know, I'm not really, it's not to the point where I'm getting involved with it. I'm just going to focus on my church. And there are areas in business where, you know, I really don't like the attempt or the influence tactic, but I'm not going to, you know, actively or openly try to go against it. And then active resistance, and this is where you do reject outright the influence, and you go after or you are actively engaged in trying to thwart or to oppose whatever it is that's going on. So these are some of the realms of power and some of the responses to those attempts at gaining power and so forth. And really, the more you are knowledgeable, the more you will be able to embrace those positive aspects of power and influence, and be able to recognize and refute those dimensions that are maybe counterproductive, those that may try to intentionally harm others, and you may do that. You know, there is a big temptation with people of power Just because they can influence, they will. And oftentimes, that human nature in us, that sin nature, will exploit people for our gain. It's just feeding the flesh. So we as Christians know better, and the more we're knowledgeable in these different areas, the better we're going to be as responsible leaders and ministers. Well, today, everyone, we took a look at using power. We saw the difference between personal power and positional power. And as we discussed in the lecture, it's always better to have people follow you because of who you are instead of just your title. But we also looked at ways that power can be abused. So these are some important elements as we continue on with power to keep to heart and to apply in your business and your ministry. Well, that's all we have for today, and we will catch back up again tomorrow as we finish out power.